Let's go back to 2024 for a second. Not to relitigate it, not to point fingers, but because you cannot understand what just happened in these World Cup qualifiers without understanding what happened before them, without understanding the moment that set everything in motion. In the summer of 2024, USA Basketball made a decision. They were building a roster for the Paris Olympics, the most prestigious stage in international basketball, the kind of tournament where legends are made, where careers get defined, where a player's name gets etched into something permanent. And they looked at Caitlin Clark, the player who had just shattered the NCAA all-time scoring record, the player who had single-handedly dragged women's basketball into primetime television, the player whose jersey was outselling everyone in the sport, whose games were filling arenas that hadn't seen those kinds of crowds in years. And they said no. They left her home. And the world watched. Not just basketball fans, not just WNBA followers, the actual world. Because by that point, Caitlin Clark wasn't just a basketball story anymore. She was a cultural moment. She was the name that people who never watched a single women's game in their lives suddenly knew. And when USA Basketball announced that roster without her name on it, the reaction wasn't confusion, it was outrage. Sports commentators couldn't stop talking about it. Social media turned it into a weeks-long debate. People who had never once cared about the WNBA were suddenly furious on her behalf. And through all of it, Caitlin Clark said almost nothing. She didn't rage on social media. She didn't fire shots through the press. She didn't let her representatives leak stories about how disrespected she felt. She went quiet, in the way that only certain kinds of competitors go quiet. Not because they've accepted the slight, but because they've already decided exactly what they're going to do about it. There's a type of athlete who responds to being underestimated by making noise, and then there's a type who responds by making history. The entire world was about to find out which type Caitlin Clark was. Fast forward to 2025, the FIBA Women's Basketball World Cup Qualifiers, San Juan, Puerto Rico. 5 games, some of the best players in women's basketball assembled under one Team USA banner. Angel Reese, Paige Bueckers, Kelsey Plum, a roster loaded with talent, loaded with names, loaded with people who had things to prove. And somewhere in the middle of all that star power, Caitlin Clark was handed a role that, given everything she had built over the previous 2 years, bordered on insulting. She was coming off the bench. 5 games later, she walked away with the tournament MVP trophy, a perfect 5-0 record, and a performance so complete, so dominant, so unmistakably her, that the only question left on the table was the one nobody in USA Basketball's front office wanted to answer out loud. How did you ever think you could win without her? Here's the thing about benching Caitlin Clark that the box scores will never fully capture. It wasn't just a coaching decision, it was a statement. Whether it was intended that way or not, it landed that way. Because when you take the most talked about, most watched, most commercially impactful player in your sport, a player who just finished a WNBA season leading her team in assists, orchestrating one of the most exciting offenses in the league, winning over every skeptic in Indiana one unselfish play at a time, and you put her in a reserve role on the national team, you are telling a story. And that story is, we still don't fully trust you. That's the context she walked into those qualifiers carrying. Not just the 2024 snub, not just 2 years of relentless public scrutiny, not just the constant noise about her defense, her attitude, whether she'd mesh with teammates who had very publicly been positioned as rivals. All of that was in the room when she sat down on that bench in San Juan and waited for her number to be called. Every single bit of it was sitting right there on her shoulders. And she looked completely unbothered. That's what stood out before she ever touched the ball. The composure. Most players in that situation, most people in that situation, let their body language tell the story their words won't. You see it in the tight jaw, in the eyes that go flat when the starting lineup is announced. in the way someone cheers a little too hard for their teammates to prove they're fine when everyone watching knows they're not fine. That's human. That's completely understandable. That would have been almost forgivable given what she'd been through. But that's not what Caitlin Clark did.
She sat there, engaged, focused, preparing, watching the game with the intensity of someone who was already mentally on the floor, cheering in a way that felt real rather than performed. And when her number was called, midway through the first quarter against Senegal, she checked in with the energy of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment and had already decided what she was going to do with it. The story of these qualifiers really starts right there. Not with the MVP trophy, not with the final box scores. It starts with a player handed every possible reason to be bitter, being something else entirely. Being exactly who she's always been when the lights get brightest. Ready. There's a moment in every great performance where you know, where you can stop wondering how this is going to go and start just watching it unfold. For Caitlin Clark in these qualifiers, that moment came approximately 30 seconds after she first touched the basketball in a Team USA uniform. 30 seconds. She brings the ball up the floor against Senegal, finds Kelsey Plum on a simple give-and-go, gets it back on the left wing, and then does something that sounds ordinary until you understand what it means. She waits. Not because she's hesitating, not because she doesn't know what she wants to do, but because she's reading. She's feeling the floor, processing the defensive geometry, waiting for the exact fraction of a second when everything shifts in her favor. Most players in that moment rush, and you can't blame them. Playing your first minutes in a national jersey, carrying 2 years of public debate on your back, with a global audience watching, and half of them hoping you stumble, the moment feels enormous. It feels like it demands action, like staying still is a form of failure. So players force it. They create pressure where there isn't any, because the psychological weight of the situation manufactures urgency out of nothing. Not Clark. She reads the screen, she feels the big defenders start to step up, and in that exact sliver of time when the defense commits, she delivers a bounce pass so perfectly timed, so precisely placed, that Monique Billings doesn't have to adjust her stride to catch it. She just catches it and finishes. 2 points. First assist in a USA uniform, and it looked exactly like every other assist Caitlin Clark has ever made. Like the outcome was never in question. Like the moment wasn't big at all. 2 plays later, Kelsey Plum gets a wide-open catch-and-shoot 3 off another Clark read, and then comes the one, the play that set the tone for everything that followed. Clark works off the ball, starts stationary in the left corner, loses her defender on a backdoor cut, curls from the baseline up to the wing, takes the handoff, and without a single beat of hesitation, launches a deep bomb. Not a floater, not a mid-range pull-up, a full deep-range 3, the kind that requires not just skill, but confidence. The specific, almost irrational confidence of someone who has made that exact shot so many times that doubt has been completely burned out of the process. It rattles in. Her first ever shot attempt for Team USA. And the people who said lucky shot, those people have clearly never spent more than 5 minutes actually watching Caitlin Clark. Because anyone who has knows what that was. It wasn't fortune, it wasn't adrenaline, it was inevitability, dressed in a number 10 jersey, doing exactly what it always does when given the chance. By the time the Senegal game wrapped up, her stat line read 17 points and 12 assists in 19 minutes. A performance so absurd coming off the bench in a debut appearance that it stopped being an interesting storyline and started feeling like something closer to a formal complaint. She had just put together one of the most efficient individual performances in recent FIBA history in less than 20 minutes of floor time in her first game in a new jersey with new teammates in a new system. And she was still coming off the bench. If you've spent any meaningful time watching the Indiana Fever, you already know how this part of the story goes. You've seen the pick and roll. You've seen the way she operates when she has the ball in her hands, with a screen being set and a defense that has to make a choice. But watching it in this tournament, watching it against international competition that had specifically game planned for her, watching it play out over 5 consecutive games against 5 different defensive philosophies, it becomes something different. It becomes a masterclass. Here's the tactical problem that every single team in this tournament faced, and none of them solved.
Drop coverage. It's the most common response to a ball handler who can shoot. You tell your big to sag back, protect the paint, don't get screened out above the arc. Give up the mid-range. Make her earn it. It's a sound scheme against most players. Against Caitlin Clark, it's a gift. She stops at the arc, reads the space, and buries the 3 before the big has even settled into position. Clean, uncontested, 2 points. Next possession. So you switch to hedge defense, hard closeout, make her uncomfortable, force the decision early, and she pivots past the closeout like it isn't there, scans the entire floor in a fraction of a second, and fires a cross-court laser to the open man on the weak side. The kind of pass that lands right in the shooter's pocket without them having to reach or adjust. The kind of pass that can only come from someone who already knew where everyone was before the play even developed. So you switch everything, matchup switching, take away the easy reads, force her into a post-up situation with a bigger defender. And suddenly, she's posting up your guard, feeling the contact, spinning baseline, and feeding the big on the slip for an easy finish at the rim. There is no right answer when Caitlin Clark runs the pick and roll. There is only a choice between bad and worse, and the defense has to make that choice every single time down the floor. The Ryan Howard connection was something beautiful, developing in real time across these games. In the WNBA, their relationship has had its complicated moments. Everyone following the league knows that. But put them on the same team, and something entirely different clicks. Clark pulls the defense from the left wing, draws 3 sets of eyes, pivots clean past the closeout, and fires a cross-court laser right into Howard's hands for the wide-open 3. Then she does it again from the opposite side of the floor. Same reads, different angle, same devastating result. Howard catching and shooting in one motion because the pass arrived exactly where it needed to be. And then there's her fast break vision, which operates on a completely different level from her half-court game. 3-on-2 situation against Senegal. Any other guard rushes that. Any other guard either throws the early pass to the corner before the defense commits or tries to take it all the way to the rim themselves. Not Clark. She holds the ball. She runs the defense. She lets the defender choose, waits for the exact moment of commitment, not before, not after, exactly at, and then slings it to Billings cutting inside. No extra dribble, perfect placement, easy score. It sounds simple when you write it out. It looks simple when you watch it back. But the timing required to execute that kind of play cleanly, in transition, in your first tournament with a new roster, that's the opposite of simple. That's the kind of thing that separates players who understand basketball from players who play it. Now here's the part of this story that nobody could have predicted, not even the most optimistic version of events heading into these qualifiers. Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese on the same team. Understand what that means in the context of recent sports history. These are 2 players whose names have been tangled together in a cultural conversation that went so far beyond basketball, it almost became unrecognizable. Not just a rivalry, not just 2 competitors at the top of their sport, but symbols. Symbols and ongoing arguments about women's athletics, about race, about fandom, about what it means to compete at the highest level of anything while the entire internet watches and assigns meaning to your every move. Their names have been weaponized in ways neither of them asked for and neither of them deserved. And in San Juan, Puerto Rico, they were running pick and rolls together for Team USA. Watch the play that crystallized it. Angel Reese sets a hard screen for Clark to get open on the left wing. Clark catches it, reads the defender, fakes the drive, and instead of forcing her own opportunity, drops a pinpoint bounce pass inside to Angel, who uses her size advantage to bully her way to the rim and finish exactly the way she does it every single night in Chicago. Textbook, unselfish, completely unbothered by the noise of what was supposedly between them. And then the Spain moment. Late in the game, 2.5 seconds on the clock. USA up, but not comfortably. No room for error. She doesn't panic. She reads where Angel has positioned herself, which in itself tells you everything, because reading where Angel has positioned herself means Caitlin Clark was watching Angel Reese, was tracking her, was trusting her enough to make her the primary option in a high-stakes moment. She finds her on a sharp entry pass, and Angel does the rest, beating the buzzer in the paint with her right hand.
In that fraction of a second, the entire media-constructed narrative of their rivalry felt genuinely embarrassing compared to what they were actually capable of building together. All that noise, all those hot takes, all those articles and segments designed to put them on opposite sides of something, and here they were, choosing each other in the most pressure-filled moment of the tournament. That's what sports can do when the players involved decide to be bigger than the stories being told about them. Not bigger in a performative way, not bigger as a message to the media, bigger because the job in front of them demanded it, and they were both capable of rising to it. Then there's what Paige Bueckers added to the equation, which brought a completely different dimension to Clark's game. When you have two pure point guards sharing the floor, something interesting happens to both of them. Clark gets to play off the ball. She gets to run off screens. She gets to operate from positions she doesn't always occupy in Indiana, moving without the ball, finding space, attacking from angles that her usual role as the primary ball handler doesn't always afford her. Bueckers drives baseline, draws the defense, sees Clark floating back into space at the three-point line, finds her, and Clark fires the catch-and-shoot triple. Money. Every time. Then Clark does the exact same thing for Bueckers 3 plays later. Creates the attention, draws the eyes, dishes to Paige for the corner 3. Reciprocal, fluid. Two elite talents operating on complete trust in real time, building chemistry not through practice or familiarity, but through the shared language of basketball intelligence. The Kelsey Plum connection threaded through the entire tournament as well. Quick touches, fast ball movement, Plum finding Clark off screens, Clark finding Plum on kickouts. There's a play against Spain where the ball moves from Kiki to Bueckers to Clark without a single dribble between any of it, and Clark buries the 3 like she's been running that exact action her whole career. That's the thing about having elite feel for the game. It doesn't need time to translate. It just does. Let's address this directly, because it needs to be addressed. There has been a persistent narrative around Caitlin Clark's defense that has followed her from Iowa to Indiana to now, surviving every piece of contradicting evidence like it's been specifically engineered to be indestructible. The idea that she can't guard anyone, that she's a liability on that end of the floor, that physical guards can bully her, that smart coaches can exploit her, that when the game gets genuinely serious on the defensive side of the ball, Caitlin Clark is the crack in the wall that everyone should be running their offense through. Critics have been saying it since her college days. They said it when she entered the WNBA. They said it every single time the Indiana Fever gave up points in the paint. And to be fair, to be completely honest about this, in her rookie season, there was at least a version of an argument to be made. She was adjusting to a faster game, stronger athletes, more complex defensive schemes. The reads were there, but the execution was still catching up. That was real. But here's what those same critics have never done: updated their information. Because the Caitlin Clark defending in these qualifiers is not the player who stepped onto a WNBA floor for the first time, still learning where to be and how fast to get there. That version was a work in progress. This version is something else entirely. And this tournament provided evidence that should, in any reasonable world, close the conversation permanently for anyone willing to actually watch the footage rather than just repeat a take they formed 18 months ago. Watch the New Zealand interception, half-court defense. New Zealand runs a standard pick and roll, the kind of action every team at every level runs constantly. And before the pass is even released, Clark is already moving, not reacting, moving. She has read the play in its earliest stages, identified where the ball is going before the handler has decided, timed her blitz perfectly,
strips possession cleanly, and is gone. Full sprint, other end, uncontested finish at the rim. That is not a lucky deflection. That is not a gamble that happened to work out. That is pure basketball IQ operating at its ceiling. A player who understands spacing, passing angles, body language, and defensive geometry well enough to know where the ball is going before the person holding it does. That instinct, the exact same instinct that makes her a historically elite passer, just pointed in the opposite direction.
Then there's the Spain play, which might be the single most underrated defensive moment of the entire tournament. Howard pushes in transition. The Spanish big secures the defensive board, but she's off balance, scrambling to find an outlet. And before she has even processed where that pass is going, Clark has already started cutting through the lane like she's been tipped off. She intercepts the pass right in the opposition's paint and converts the easiest 2 points she scored across all 5 games. Defense to offense. Zero hesitation, maximum efficiency. That's not a hustle play. That's an elite competitor understanding that basketball doesn't pause and reset between possessions. It flows, and every single moment inside that flow contains an opportunity if you're paying close enough attention. There's also a moment against one of the European sides, triple teamed on the perimeter, 3 defenders. Most guards in that position panic, pick up the dribble, take a charge, or launch a desperate prayer into traffic. Clark dances, composes herself, reads all 3 bodies simultaneously, and then pulls out a stop-spin turnaround jumper from the foul line that rattles in while the entire defense stands there trying to process what just happened. That play reminded the world of something worth remembering. Before she became the greatest passer in women's basketball, before she became the orchestrator and the facilitator and the player who makes everyone around her better, she was the NCAA's all-time leading scorer. That scoring instinct never went anywhere. It just became more precise, more patient, more selective. She picks her moments now rather than hunting them every possession, and when she picks them, they land like an exclamation point on a performance that was already making its point perfectly well without them. By the 3rd game of this tournament, something started becoming almost darkly funny. Country after country, coach after coach, defender after defender, every single team that stepped across from Team USA ran their own internal calculation about how to handle Caitlin Clark. They watched the film, they held the defensive meetings, they drew up the coverage schemes, and every single one of them arrived at roughly the same answer. Sit back, protect the paint, make her shoot over the top, take away the drive, don't let her get downhill. And every single one of them watched the same thing happen. Clark stops at the arc, takes what you give her, releases. 3 points. Next possession. Against Senegal, against Italy, against New Zealand, different teams, different defensive personnel, different game situations, same result. Simple high pick and roll. Defense drops, ball stops, 3 goes in. And the announcer's questions stopped being rhetorical after a while. When are these teams going to learn? Because it wasn't really a question about learning, it was a question about solving. And nobody has solved it because there may not be a clean solution available. You respect her range, and she drives past you. You protect the drive, and she shoots over the top of you. You hedge hard on the ball handler, and she kicks it out for an uncontested 3 to the corner. You switch everything, and she exploits mismatches on the interior. There is no defensive philosophy that adequately addresses a player who can do all of those things at that level with that consistency in that compressed amount of time per game. The drop coverage problem became almost comical by the final game, not because the opposing coaches were incompetent, they weren't, but because sometimes a player simply operates beyond the range of what conventional defensive strategy is built to contain. That's where Caitlin Clark is right now, beyond the conventional answer. And yet, and this is important, the tactical dominance isn't even the most significant thing that came out of these 5 games, because above all the assists and the contested threes and the defensive reads and the MVP trophy, there's a human story embedded in this tournament that deserves to be acknowledged directly. The image of Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese setting screens for each other, making eye contact on passes, celebrating on the bench together. That image carries weight that has nothing to do with win-loss records or shooting percentages.
These are two women who have been pitted against each other by an industry that profits from conflict, whose names have been turned into weapons in conversations that had very little to do with basketball and everything to do with the broader cultural moment those conversations were really about. They didn't ask to become symbols. They didn't audition for that role. It was handed to them by a media ecosystem that needed a narrative and decided they were the right people to cast in it. And in San Juan, they looked at all of that and chose something different.
They chose winning. They chose the work. They chose to let what happens on the court speak louder than anything written about them off it. And the work they produced together was genuinely beautiful. Not beautiful in some made-for-TV way. Beautiful the way purely functional, perfectly executed basketball is beautiful, which is the only kind that actually matters. Let's let the numbers sit for a moment. 5 games, 5 wins, tournament MVP, 11.6 points, 6.4 assists, 1.6 rebounds per game, 53% shooting from the field, all of it in 20 minutes a night, all of it coming off the bench, all of it in a debut international tournament with a new roster carrying the weight of a very public snub and 2 years of relentless scrutiny. Now remove the context for a second. If someone handed you those numbers with no name attached, you'd assume you were looking at a player handed the keys to the offense, given every resource, given starters minutes, built into the system as the centerpiece. Not someone brought off the bench in a reserve role on a team that had already decided their starting unit. The efficiency alone is borderline absurd. 53% from the field in 20 minutes off the bench in an international tournament. That's not a hot streak. That's not someone getting favorable matchups. That's a player operating at a level of technical precision that makes volume almost irrelevant, because when she is on the floor, every single minute of it counts. And through all of it, every game, every minute, every possession, she never coasted. Never floated through a play waiting for the big moment to arrive. She competed every possession, both ends, like the game score was tied and 30 seconds remained on the clock. The reduced minutes didn't lower her intensity. The bench role didn't shrink her investment. Every possession in every game of every night, she was all the way in. That's not nothing. That's actually the hardest thing in sports. Staying fully locked in when you're not being given everything you've earned. There's a moment late in the tournament that crystallizes everything. Clark comes off a screen, receives the ball on the wing from Paige, pump fakes once, puts it on the floor, draws the defense, and in that fraction of a second between the fake and the kickout, you can see her scanning the entire floor, reading 3 defenders simultaneously, processing the geometry, finding Copper in the corner, and delivering the pass before the defense can recover. All of it in real time, under maximum pressure, in a high-stakes game on an international stage. That's what the 20 minutes a night hid. That's what the coming off the bench headline covered up. The fact that every single time she was on that floor, she was the best player in the building. Not one of the best, the best. She didn't just help Team USA qualify for the World Cup. She made a statement about who she is as a competitor and what she intends to do on the biggest stages the sport has to offer. She showed up to a tournament where she had every reason to be guarded, every reason to play within herself, every reason to protect her ego and let the results be whatever they were. Instead, she played the most expansive, generous, joyful version of basketball she has ever shown on an international stage. They left her home in 2024. They brought her off the bench in 2025. She went 5-0 and took the MVP anyway. Now the World Cup is coming, and the questions that tournament will ask are bigger than any stat line or highlight package. How does the game adjust to someone who refuses to fit into any defensive scheme built to contain her? Who will rise up to actually challenge her on that stage? And when the world finally sees what she's capable of, with full minutes, with full trust, on the biggest stage women's basketball has ever seen, will anyone actually be ready for it? The tournament is over. The trophy is won.
But what Caitlin Clark just started in San Juan feels less like a conclusion and a lot more like a warning. The real show hasn't even started yet.